just after midnight. The calm of Clonard Street is interrupted by a frantic call to emergency services. A young husband is on the line, his voice unsteady. He tells the operator his wife has fallen down the stairs. He says he heard a loud thud, rushed out of the bedroom, and found her at the bottom of the staircase. She wasn't breathing. When paramedics arrive, they find 27-year-old Mary Guff lying on the floor of her own hallway. A duvet has been pulled over her, as if someone tried to keep her warm. Her dressing gown isn't nearby. Her husband is pacing the house, visibly upset, repeating the same account again and again. She fell. She wasn't breathing. I called as soon as I found her. Mary is rushed to Beaumont Hospital, but almost immediately, doctors sense that something isn't right. Her skin feels colder than it should. The injuries they can see don't fully line up with a simple fall. As they take a closer look at her neck, staff begin exchanging quiet glances. Before long, detectives are notified. This doesn't look like a routine household accident. So what really happened inside that house before the emergency call was made? And how did a newlywed, married less than 6 months, end up dead at the bottom of her own stairs? Mary Goff grew up in Stamell in County Meath. Born in 1974, she was the only girl in a family of 5 brothers. After her father died in 1989, Mary became her mother, Marie's closest companion. They shared a bond that went beyond the usual mother and daughter relationship. They were best friends. Being the only girl among so many boys meant Mary learned early how to hold her own. But it never hardened her. She was known for her kindness and warmth, the kind of person people naturally felt comfortable around. She worked as a legal secretary at a solicitor's office in Swords, where she was well respected by everyone she worked with. Her best friend, Sinead Byrne, described her as happy and cheerful, but also quiet and thoughtful. Mary didn't want anything extravagant. She wanted a loving marriage, children, and a place she could truly call home. In 1993, when she was 19, Mary was working at the Huntsman Inn near her family home. That's where she met Colin Whelan, a man from North County, Dublin. It was her first serious relationship. It would also be her last. Colin was a regular at the Huntsman Inn. He came in often enough that Mary noticed him, and eventually, he noticed her too. They started dating, and for the first couple of years, the relationship seemed steady. Nothing stood out as unusual. In 1995, they hit a rough patch and broke up. The split didn't last long, though. After a few months apart, they got back together and carried on as before. By 1997, Colin bought a house on Clonard Street in Balbriggan from a relative. It felt like a practical step forward, a sign that they were settling into a shared future. The following year, Colin proposed. Mary said yes. They got engaged and began planning their wedding. To friends and family, they looked like a long-term couple, finally reaching the milestone everyone expected. Mary's mother, Marie, welcomed Colin like a son. Her brothers treated him as one of their own. From the outside, it looked like a close, supportive family. On September 9, 2000, Mary Guff and Colin Whelan were married. Mary looked beautiful that day. She was finally marrying the man she had been with since she was 19. But those closest to her noticed something small, something hard to explain. Marie Guff would later say that Mary didn't seem as happy as she should have been. There was something in her expression that unsettled her, even then. What no one knew at the time was that, as Colin stood at the altar and made his vows, he was already planning to kill his wife. 3 months earlier, in June 2000, Colin had doubled their life insurance policy. If either of them died within 10 years, the surviving spouse would receive more than £500,000, an enormous amount of money at the time. It would later become clear that money played a major role in what followed, and the insurance policy was only the start. Between July 2000 and February 2001, Colin, who worked as a computer analyst at Irish Permanent Bank, carried out at least 21 internet searches from his workplace. The terms he searched were disturbing: asphyxiation, loss of consciousness, how long it takes to die from asphyxiation, lack of oxygen to the brain, death by strangulation, choking. He wasn't just curious, he was researching how to kill someone and how to get away with it. Colin went even further. He downloaded a court transcript from the North Carolina Supreme Court detailing the case of Henry Louis Wallace, an American serial killer convicted of 9 murders. Wallace was known for strangling his victims in a way that left little visible evidence. He used a towel beneath the ligature to reduce bruising and marks on the neck. It was a method designed to look like something else. Just 4 months into the marriage, in late 2000, Whelan began an online relationship with a woman in Britain. He sent her photos and used the name Celtic Tackle. In their messages, he talked about money, hinting at a large payout he expected to receive. In the weeks leading up to March 2001, the relationship intensified. They had never met in person, but they made plans to meet for the first time on March 2, 2001. By then, Whelan fully intended to be free and wealthy. On February 28, 2001, Colin and Mary traveled together to Drogheda, where they took part in a detox program run by a homeopath. That evening, they returned to their home on Clonard Street in Balbriggan. It would be Mary's last night alive. Sometime late that night, or in the early hours of March 1st, Colin Whelan carried out a plan he had been researching for months. He strangled Mary using the belt from her own dressing gown. He followed the method he had studied carefully, using a buffer to reduce visible injuries and avoid obvious marks on her neck. After Mary was dead, Whelan set about making the scene look like an accident. He removed the belt and left the dressing gown behind in the master bedroom. He placed Mary's body at the bottom of the stairs. To support the idea that her death had just happened, he covered her with a duvet in an attempt to keep her body warm. Another detail he had learned through his research. At 12:16 a.m. on March 1st, Colin Whelan called emergency services. On the recording, he sounds upset. He tells the operator that his wife has fallen down the stairs and isn't breathing. He says he heard the fall and found her unconscious at the bottom of the staircase. An ambulance is dispatched right away. When paramedics arrive, they take Mary to Beaumont Hospital. Colin follows in his own car. But from the moment doctors begin examining Mary, concerns start to surface. Several medical staff notice that her body is unusually cold to the touch. It immediately raises questions about the timeline Whelan has given. If Mary had only fallen moments before the call, why was her body temperature already so low? The doctor who tried to resuscitate Mary and inserted a breathing tube noticed marks on her neck and chest that didn't fit with the fall down the stairs. Around the same time, a nurse who had spoken with Colin alerted Balbriggan Gardaí to something else. He had fresh scratches across his chest. By the time Mary was pronounced dead on arrival, hospital staff were already questioning Colin Whelan's account. Mary's mother, Marie Guff, arrived at Beaumont Hospital shortly after 1 a.m. She found Colin sitting with his head in his hands. When she asked how Mary was, he looked up and said, flatly, that she was dead. That was it. The lack of emotion in his response stayed with her. It would haunt her for years. Detective Inspector Pat Mary and his team from Balbriggan Garda Station took over the investigation. Almost immediately, they began to see problems with the story they'd been given. The medical evidence didn't support a simple fall. State pathologist Dr. Marie Cassidy carried out the post-mortem examination, and her conclusion left no room for doubt. This was a murder. Dr. Cassidy confirmed that Mary Guff had not died from falling down the stairs. She had been strangled. There was a clear ligature mark on the right side of her neck. She had bleeding beneath the eyes, burst blood vessels caused by pressure on the neck. Her tongue was swollen to 3 times its normal size, another sign of asphyxiation. There was also a burn mark on the side of her neck caused by the ligature itself. If Mary had fallen down the stairs, doctors would have expected head injuries. There were none. Gardaí carried out a forensic examination of the house on Clonard Street. Inside the master bedroom and on the landing, they found blood staining. Mary's dressing gown and its belt were also in the bedroom, not on her body, where they would have been if she had been wearing it when she fell. Most damaging of all, there was blood in the center of the belt. DNA testing confirmed it belonged to Mary. This was the weapon used to kill her. Investigators seized Colin Whelan's computer and phone. The Garda fraud squad traced his internet activity, and what they uncovered told its own story. The 21 searches related to strangulation and asphyxiation pointed clearly to planning, not impulse. And the downloaded court transcript about Henry Louis Wallace showed that Whelan hadn't just searched for information, He had studied another killer's method in detail. By this point, there was no longer any doubt about what had happened inside that house. Both cases followed the same pattern. In each one, a duvet was used to keep the body warm. In each one, a towel was used to hide marks left by strangulation. These weren't coincidences. They were deliberate choices, taken from someone else's crime. At the scene, Gardaí found a towel close to Mary's body. On April 10, 2001, just over a month after Mary's death, Colin Whelan was arrested and charged with her murder. He was questioned by Detective Inspector Pat Mary and his team. Faced with the evidence, Whelan refused to engage. To every question, he answered the same way: no comment. He continued to insist that Mary's death had been a tragic accident. Whelan later appeared in court and pleaded not guilty. His trial was scheduled for October 13, 2003, more than 2 years away. That same day, in a decision that would have serious consequences, he was granted bail. The conditions were strict. He had to surrender his passport and report daily to Balbriggan Garda Station. For more than a year, he did exactly that. Every day, he signed in as required. Then, 7 months before the trial was due to begin, Colin Whelan disappeared. On March 12, 2003, his family went to Balbriggan Garda Station to report him missing. Later that day, his Peugeot 206 was found abandoned on the Upper Cliff Road at Howth Head, overlooking the sea. The keys were left on the passenger seat. Inside the car, Gardaí found an empty bottle of gin and several personal items. A large-scale search followed. Sea, air, and land units were deployed across Howth Head and the surrounding waters. The working assumption was that Whelan had taken his own life by jumping from the cliffs. But no body was ever found. Both the Goff and Whelan families believed something else had happened, that Colin Whelan was still alive, and that the scene had been staged to help him avoid trial. Interpol was notified, and the search widened beyond Ireland. For more than a year, there was no sign of him. It seemed as though he had simply vanished. So much uncertainty followed that the two families even ended up in a legal dispute over ownership of the abandoned car. In Dublin District Court, a judge ruled that the vehicle should be handed over to the state. Then, in July 2004, investigators finally got the break they had been waiting for. A holidaymaker in Mallorca, Spain, noticed a man working behind the bar who looked familiar. The tourist trusted their instincts and contacted local police. The bartender was Colin Whelan. By the time he was found, Colin Whelan had been living in Mallorca under a false name, Martin Sweeney. He had obtained a fake Irish passport and, using that identity, had even been vetted by Spanish police. He was issued a Spanish national ID card, got a job, made friends, and started a relationship. By all appearances, he had built an entirely new life. With the cooperation of Spanish authorities, Whelan was extradited back to Ireland on July 10, 2004, more than 3 years after Mary's murder. Once back in Ireland, Judge Paul Carney offered him the chance of an immediate trial. Whelan refused, choosing instead to delay the case even further. For Mary's family, it meant more waiting, more unanswered questions, and no sense of closure. Finally, in April 2005, Colin Whelan appeared before the Central Criminal Court in Dublin. This time, he changed his plea. He admitted that he had murdered his wife, Mary Goff, on February 28, 2001. For the Goff family, it was the first time they heard the full details of what had happened and how much planning had gone into it. Marie Goff later said that learning the truth in court was devastating. Until then, she hadn't known why her daughter had been killed. The prosecution laid out the evidence piece by piece. The life insurance policy had been doubled just months before the wedding. The 21 internet searches about strangulation and asphyxiation. The downloaded court transcript from a serial killer's case. The online relationship with another woman he planned to meet days after Mary's death. The staged fall down the stairs. And the forensic evidence proving Mary had been strangled with the belt from her own dressing gown. When it came time for victim impact statements, Mary's family spoke directly to the court. Her brother Gerard spoke on behalf of them all. "Our family is living a life sentence since her murder and will always have to live with it. There's no parole for us. Mary is gone forever, and we can't escape that. She's not coming back." Gerard's twin brother, David Goff, then addressed Colin Whelan directly. Whelan kept his head down and refused to look at him. "On March 1st, 2001, you strangled Mary," David said. "And for that, we will never forgive you. You destroyed our family. You didn't just take Mary, you took a part of us as well. And then you ran. You fled the country. That shows exactly who you are. You tried to take justice away from us. You thought you were above the law," the court was told. "But you're not. Justice has finally been done today. Mary's only crime was loving you too much." Mary's mother, Marie Goff, spoke about the question that still tormented her. If Colin didn't want to be married, why hadn't he just walked away? She said she could only conclude that he never truly loved her daughter. If he had, he would have left instead of doing what he did. "I treated him like a son," she said. "The boys treated him like a brother. We were one happy family." Colin Whelan's barrister, Hugh Hartnett, told the court that his client wished to offer his deepest apologies to the Goff family. Whelan himself addressed Marie directly, saying he was sorry for taking her daughter, her friend, and her soulmate, and that it had all been unnecessary. For the family, the words meant very little. When it came time for sentencing, Judge Paul Carney spoke plainly and forcefully. He described the killing as the most calculated and callous murder he had encountered during his time on the bench. Because Whelan had fled the country and delayed justice, the judge refused to backdate the sentence for time already served. Colin Whelan was sentenced to mandatory life imprisonment, effective from that day, April 12, 2005. Mary Goff's murder left damage that can never truly be repaired. Marie Goff, who had already lost her husband and now her only daughter, described the weight of it as something she would carry for the rest of her life. "He fooled everyone," she told reporters. "We thought we knew him, but it was all an act." The sense of betrayal ran deep. This was someone the family had welcomed into their home, trusted and loved, someone they believed would protect Mary, not harm her. The case sent shockwaves through Balbriggan and across Ireland. The level of planning involved, the fact that the murder had been considered even before the wedding, and Whelan's decision to run rather than face trial, all gripped the public's attention. It became widely known as Ireland's staircase murder. Detective Inspector Pat Murray, who led the investigation and later retired, said it was the one case he would never forget. Speaking years later, he described Whelan as calculating and deeply dangerous. Of all the cases he worked on during his career, this one stood apart for how deliberate and cold it had been. And for Mary's family, that reality is something they continue to live with every single day. For Mary's family, the loss never fades. It's something they carry with them every day. Marie Goff once said they hold no hatred, because life is already hard enough without that weight. But the pain is still there. Mary was just 27 years old. She had plans. She wanted children, a home of her own, a marriage built on love and trust. She should have had the chance to live that life. Colin Whelan has now spent more than 20 years in prison. He became eligible for parole, but according to recent reports, he has not been granted early release. He remains in an Irish prison, serving a life sentence. After his conviction, a woman named Katie Wilcox was reported to visit him regularly and said she would stand by him. Whether that support continues today isn't known. Mary Goff's murder is a reminder that real harm doesn't always come from strangers. Colin Whelan wasn't someone on the outside of her life. He was her partner, her husband, someone she had known since she was 19. He was welcomed into her family, trusted completely, and treated as one of their own. And yet, behind that familiar face was someone capable of careful, deliberate cruelty. While planning a wedding, he was researching how to kill. He took out life insurance with his wife's death in mind. He studied other crimes, not out of curiosity, but to learn how to avoid detection. This wasn't a sudden loss of control. It was planned, it was thought through. And when the truth began to close in, he ran, trying to disappear and start over, while Mary's family was left to grieve. There are difficult lessons in this case. One is that terrible acts can be carried out by people who appear ordinary and trustworthy. Another is that even those closest to us can hide things we never see. And finally, that justice doesn't always come quickly, but it can still come. It took 4 years from Mary's death to Colin Whelan's conviction. But through the persistence of investigators like Detective Inspector Pat Murray, he was ultimately held accountable. And Mary Guff was not forgotten. Mary's family still lives with the space she left behind. They carry her with them in memories, in stories, and in the quiet ways she continues to shape their lives. What happened to Mary is a tragedy. But it's also a reminder of the determination of investigators who refused to let her killer walk away, and of a family who never stopped fighting to make sure their daughter was remembered. And there's something else this case asks us to think about. It reminds us to pay attention when women seem unhappy, even when everything on the surface looks right. When someone doesn't seem settled, when something feels off, even on days that are supposed to be joyful, those moments matter. Sometimes, listening and taking those concerns seriously can make all the difference. Thank you for watching Murder Ledger. We explore real cases, unanswered questions, and the details that refuse to fade. If these stories matter to you, consider subscribing and sharing your thoughts in the comments.